Hello, Stephen.
Hello, I'm glad
Uh,
to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have you on the channel. You are a psychologist, a researcher, and the creator of acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a form of psychotherapy that uses mindfulness, acceptance, and values-based methods. You are the author of a lot of books, 50 books, I think,
Yeah, I think.
and that's a lot. I didn't read all your books. I read two books, and the last one, Liberated Mind, and the first one, it's Get Out of Your Mind and
Yes,
Into Your Life.
yes.
Yes. And for my first question, can you tell us what was the personal and professional journey that led you to create acts?
Yeah, I was as a young psychologist wanting to understand the human mind and why it was so difficult to be human, and I was focusing in on some early work that showed that when people get rules in their head, when they formulate things verbally, it makes them less sensitive to what's happening in their world. And this came out of a pretty strong behavioral tradition. I was raised as a behavior analyst. You could even say a Skinnerian. I hope people don't immediately hang up because it's widely misunderstood what that tradition is. And uh, I was puttering along in in that area and then developed a panic disorder myself for reasons that I've talked about and we can explore here. And I found that the methods that I'd learned from traditional behavioral and cognitive approaches just didn't have much traction, just didn't help me very much. And it wasn't until went back to my earlier days as a hippie and a psychedelic explorer. Before that was you could be done responsibly, and a little bit of contact with different kind of, you could say, Eastern traditions, but also I was trained in the forms of contemplative practice that are associated more Jesuits, the Ignatian way and things like that. It was uh, uh, my college degree, and most of my training was with Catholic schools, and the Jesuits are very interesting and often ignored as part of the contemplative community, but they really are in their own way. Anyway, when I turned back to that, I got some traction. So I've spent 20 years really almost invisible to anybody who was watching closely. We did a few randomized trials, just three or four. Only published one, so my first doctoral student could get a job. Put it aside, even the ones that were very successful, because I knew we weren't ready. And we worked on the theory, the methods, the assessment, the components, philosophy of science. And then finally in 1999 presented the book called ACT, that were called early on, it had different names. And then over the last 20 years, it's become enormously impactful with 1,100 randomized trials, probably about 100,000 people around the world trained in ACT and, all of that. So what happened in that journey was uh, I realized that I needed to add some things to just what I'd been doing before in order to really hack that human mind. And I'm here. I think the one thing that really differentiates ACT from other approaches, we have more data on processes of change. We have a basic theory of language and cognition that has hundreds of studies on it and that is relevant if you have a child who can't speak or, can't doesn't develop a normal sense of self, or even if you want to raise your IQ. I mean, it's pretty powerful in itself. So that 40 plus year journey means I can sit here saying, we know a lot about the basic processes, and I'll summarize that in a way that maybe lands more simply. I think we've identified the smallest set of processes that do the most work for the most people in the most areas. And I don't care if you call it ACT or not, but do care about those processes because they'll uplift your life. And I can say what they are in a sentence, but I've been talking too long, so I'm going to pause before I even say
Mm.
it. But that's what that personal journey was. It's how it walked me out of my panic disorder, and we've learned how to put it into people's lives.
So, what I hear is that it was created uh, maybe for your panic disorder or in that context.
Well, I had no choice. I mean, I was at the point where I literally could barely give a lecture to six undergraduates, and I'm a professor, untenured. This is not a good combination.
Mm.
You know, I showed them a lot of films, and but I would get so anxious that it was hard for me to show the films. I couldn't get the film in the sprockets because I'd be shaking so hard. I mean, it used to be that you had film, that had sprockets, you had projectors. Probably
Mm.
you don't know what this is. It wasn't like it is now. And I couldn't even do that. So, you know, I had a choice. Either I was going to figure out what the heck was going on. That's the way I thought about it originally, or my career would end. And what happened in that 3 year journey is I didn't figure out a way out of that problem, but I did figure out a way into that problem.
Mm.
And that made all the difference.
Yeah, and maybe it's the specificity of this method that you go into, maybe with the acceptance and the commitment. Can you explain what is
Yeah,
ACT?
after all those 40 years, I can say it very, very simply. But it took a lot to get there. And we're even now today learning new processes and how they fit together. But the core of it is learn to be more open emotionally and cognitively. Learn to be more present, allocating your attention in a way that's flexible, fluid, and voluntary, but from a transcendent sense of self, not from the storied self, not from the narrative of who you are, but from the point of consciousness that connects you to others. And when you've done that, it means, okay, you're showing up in the present with your history. Now you can focus on what you want to be about in your life, what brings meaning and purpose to you, what's intrinsic to your actions, and you can build habits around that. And then if you extend all that, learning to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a life worth living to your relationships, and by the way, take care of your body,
Mm.
that summarizes almost everything we know, regardless of the method, when it's tested experimentally about how change happens.
Mm.
And I can say that because we have looked at the 55,000 studies that claim to know how change happens. We centered on the ones that did it right, and we've summarized that entire literature. And I can summarize it in the way I just did. Learn to be more open, aware, and actively engaged. Extend that to your relationships and take care of your body. The end. Thank you very much. So it's been a 40-year journey. And you know, when you get there, the way I explain it, it's like you've been wandering in the forest and and finally you get to a clearing and there's sun and it's wonderful and everything's so clear and simple. And then you look over there and there's like a monk over there, and there's a priest over there. There's another deep clinician over there. Just a person who collects garbage but is incredibly wise over there. And you say, it must be something important about this clearing.
Mm.
I don't think you should say, hey, your pathway wasn't mine. Mine was the best pathway to the clearing. Please grow up. There's many ways. And the wisdom traditions show that mystics and just common folks sometimes have experiences that walk you into that clearing. The only thing that I'm bringing to the table based on that journey is we can do experimental analyses of the exact processes. We can measure them and apply them to individuals. And connect them to theories that are robust, kind of not just blah, blah, blah theories, but the kind of theories that you can put into the lab and test and develop. And that's kind of cool.
mm,
It doesn't replace or subtract from the person who had a mystical experience and showed up in the clearing, or maybe that person who then did that and created a religious tradition. Almost all the founders of major religions had mystical experiences. Hello. And then they started trying to explain it, make it, and next thing you know, you're in religious wars. So
mm,
be careful of any explanation if it doesn't really empower. So
mm. Yes,
that
it's very interesting because you talk about some concept, central concepts in ACT that is self as context, or the uh, in spiritual practices the witness, or in some other it's the true self, or
yeah, yeah,
uh, the awareness, or there's a lot of
I
words.
agree.
And can you unpack a little bit in the ACT perspective? What's the use of discovering or pointing out this mode of self? Or
Well, I think the most important part of the whole model, and I think it's the pivot point, it's the foundation that allows you to show up to your history, let go, come into the present moment, and then focus on meaning and purpose. The pivot on that, the way I think of it, it's almost like a windshield wiper. Letting go begins to clear up the possibility, then come into the present, and then you can look at the pivot point down here at the bottom is this sense of self. And I like demystifying it, making it very, very simple and not treating it as an it. There's a reason why the Buddhists and so forth don't want to talk about self. Because as soon as you talk about self, the very word says it, ab out, you're out, not in. Ab out. It means near and out. So words are near and out. They're not the same as in. You can't point to the moon and have it be the moon. It's just a
mm,
class kind of way of thinking about that. Words aren't what they refer to. Well, when you demystify it, I think this kind of sense of self is built into human consciousness. It begins when you're on 4, when there's a break from simply being able to interact in and with the world and even have words for it. And what the break comes from perspective taking, from learning relations like here and there, and I and you, and now and then, and left and right, and up and down that are relevant to a particular perspective or point of view only, the so-called deictic relations and the underlying theory behind that. Knowing that, you can easily go back and put some breadcrumbs on the ground to help people get started. When those all come together around age 4 or so, you can actually step out and look back at yourself. That's a break.
mm,
Consciousness, the story of evolution is the story of consciousness. I mean, simple single-celled organisms don't have eyes, but when you do, you're able to interact with the world in a way that helps you um, see the regularities between what's inside and outside. And more complex organism, more and more, better, 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 better. And then there's a break. And human consciousness is that break. Now, when you catch that, it has an odd feature because although the witnessing, noticing, perspective taking sense of self has no qualities that you can notice, has no edges that you can notice, you can't be conscious of being unconscious. It's impossible.
mm,
So it means, these things, everywhere you go, there you are. Yeah, hello,
mm,
because there's no edges. It's no thing. A thing has edges. No thing doesn't have edges. And so everything, nothing, kind of an Eastern way of talking about this. Uh, however, Um, even that is the witnessing, noticing sense of self isn't completely expanding. It's more here, now, I. However, it's part of a system that expands. Let me see if I can explain. Have you ever looked at the eyes of somebody that you love for a moment, maybe a long moment? There's no I and you, there's just we. You blend, not in an unhealthy way, but in such a profound way that you feel like you're in love. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
Most people have had that kind of experience. Most people, if you ask the question right, have had spiritual experiences. If you cast it in terms of God, it gets smaller. But even then, most people used to think, oh, no, it's only the extraordinary people. No, 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 this is as common as dirt. It's in the mid 90s of people who agree that they've had them when you word it right. And the rest of them are lying because human consciousness itself contains these moments. You look at a sunset and you so blend with that moment. It's as if this is all. You're just in awe, right? You're walking in nature, you have those experiences. Okay, here's my point. The witness can at times blend to the point where it's simply being. There's no awareness of awareness at that moment if you fully go into it. You see this in psychedelic work now, and we're kind of, because you can repeat these things very, I mean, oceanic awareness, a sense of oneness across time, place, and person is a marker of whether or not psychedelic assisted therapy will have lasting impact. It's a mediator.
mm,
Well, there are times where you so go into that that you, even as a witness, disappear. And there are contemplative traditions that say that. They say, no, 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 it's not just the witness.
mm,
Yes, but here's the thing I have to say about that. A, most practical people just want a little bit of help and maybe not what you get with 20 days of silent meditation or a month or a year. B, which is okay. I mean, it's okay if people want to do it. But B, if you go from the witnessing, noticing sense of self that you can tap into really easily with exercises to begin the journey of getting there, because it's built into human consciousness. The 4-year-old is beginning to get it when they step back and look at themselves. That's my argument anyway. If you really blend into the one, there's nothing to say. In fact, it's very hard to even remember what happened. People who've had experiences like that um, talk only in metaphors if they talk at all. And in psychedelic assisted therapy, when people have had experiences that go that far that you just blend into the one and time disappears and stops, place is gone, personhood as we normally think of it is gone. When you come back from those trips, you have almost nothing to say. Can I talk about an experience? Only the second time I've talked about it that explains this.
mhm,
One reason I want to do it is I was on a podcast or a thing uh, uh, as part of a mindfulness summit that uh, Ron Siegel had organized, good, well-known teacher. And I am impulse in the question and answer tried to explain this. I tried to write about it for a liberated mind, and the editor said, no, 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 you can't put that in. It just sounds like a hippie drug trip. You cannot do this. I said, okay. Well, so I told the story and I didn't tell it very well because yes, I had some chemicals assistance, but but the experience was more important than that. And I want to tell the story if I can. I was sitting across from my best friend, a guy named John Jones, dead now. Um, and we decided we were just going to look at each other. And he was sitting quite close on a pillow, and I was sitting on a pillow. And so we just sat looking at each other's eyes. I enjoyed being with him. I love the guy. He's such a kind, wonderful, creative, crazy human being. And I began to sort of dive into his eyes. And his eyes went from this big over time to like this big. And they're like specks of orange in the iris and brown. And it seemed like it was almost alive. And I just sort of, well, as this was happening, just as I glanced at the clock and it said 4 o'clock. Wait a minute, 5 o'clock. It said 5 o'clock. I glanced and I'm looking at these eyes and they become huge. And it's hard to explain. It's like looking at a mandala when you just enter into it. And it's so beautiful and encompassing and peaceful and loving. And it's like you're seeing the entire universe. So that goes on just for a little while. And then I come back and I notice his eyes in his head again. He's still sitting there. And I glance at the clock. When I told this story, for some reason, over there, I said it was 9 o'clock. It was 8 o'clock. I was trying to exaggerate to try to make it seem more impactful. God dang it. Still ego, you can't get away. God dang thing. But I glanced at the clock and it said 5 o'clock moments earlier and it said 8 o'clock. I went, oh. Now here's the thing. It's important to me that I know that exploring this space includes a space where time and space and personhood disappear. It's not that practically useful in my experience, and I don't have very much to say about it by definition, other than something like you'd say if you saw a sunset. Wow. So mindfulness could be wowfulness, and I think it's wonderful, and all of that. But let's not turn. Isn't there a Zen koan? Let's not turn these experiences to the flowers before our eyes. You know, sometimes the flowers need to be here so that you can see. And I think we can put into the human condition, human community, very small bits of what that is that do a lot of the good of what that can do. I've talked a lot. I can give you an example if you want. I hope that story didn't seem just crazy or whatever, but I wanted to tell it right. Thank you for allowing me to do that here. Because it's only the second time I've ever said it out loud while it was being recorded. I wanted to write it down, but they said that was just hippie trips. And anyway, yeah, I was saying in small ways, like I'll give you an example just clinically. I'm all bound up with a client. I can't, get the movement. I say, wait a minute, wait a minute. Could we just leave us here? Come here, come here. I walk over to the side of the room. Say, come here, come here. Person walks with me. We spin around. Now we can see the two chairs we're in. And I'd say, what do you think we should tell those people to do? And always the client says something wise. Always. Why? You didn't do anything. Yeah, you did. You. I'm now treating that one as if I'm noticing. Here, there. I'm going over there and I'm looking back over here. And where it used to be here, that's now there. And from here, I can see there and I see it differently. And if I wanted to add to it, wanted to add time, I could. I could say, come here, over here. Let's imagine that we've had a spectacular lives over the next 10 years and we're both a lot wiser. Just imagine that. Now, turn over here. You remember those guys long ago? They were bound up talking. So I could do time too.
Mm.
Always wise, no matter how bound up the person is, which tells me I can tell you and anybody who's listening, you have wisdom within. It's just this organism doesn't get, this organ doesn't get it. And one way to get it is to tap into what's inside this witnessing self, which is perspective taking. And is that exercise I just gave the same as 10 years of meditating? No, it's not. Is it on the same path? Yes, it is. Is it tapping into the same processes that really make a difference? Yes, it does. Can you go farther? Yes, you can. But let's not turn it into flowers before our eyes. If you're moved to do it and you want to do a deep dive, do it. But also remember there's people who will never do a 2 hour sitting, never mind a 10-day. And can we This is something I said to John Kabat-Zinn when we first got to know each other. And I said, John, do you care about the process or the method? He said, the process. I said, do you care about people on the factory floor or only the educated elite and young people who can afford to do this kind of thing? He said, I care about everybody. I said, I'm with you, my friend. We're partners, fellow travelers. Can we put something on the factory floor or in the kitchen or in your car that empowers living a life that's whole and free and more compassionate towards others? Let's see. We sure need it, don't we?
There's a point here. The self as context or the witness is a kind of stepping back and looking. What's the link with the acceptance? Because it
Yeah.
could seem a kind of it could be I imagine a little bit of uh, bypassing maybe sometimes in the spiritual circles. The witness is sometimes used as an escape from to avoid feeling difficult
Betcha.
feelings. How do you reconcile the two?
Yeah, let's use a metaphor. So stepping back is a little dangerous as a way to cast it. It's correct, but it's dangerous. Suppose you were looking at a fantastic painting, and maybe the brushstrokes were done with lots of little dots and things like that. And you're standing with your nose on the painting, looking at it. And I say, could you tell me what that painting is about? Can you tell me what the experience is? And it's very difficult to say very much. And then I say, wait a minute, could you just back up about 4 feet? And now we look at the painting. Is that stepping back or stepping in?
Mm.
I think it's stepping in. It's not stepping back. You can observe and appreciate and maybe even describe. You can have that wow. You can say, how pink, like you would with a sunset. Maybe without saying, but God, the cloud is shaped the wrong way. It needs more blue. Add some more blue. Then it would be a good sunset. I saw a sunset yesterday. It's better than this sunset. Why don't you give me a good set? Like, please. Make it stop. So what we're doing with what acceptance means, it comes from a Latin root, must be in French somewhere, septere. It meant to receive, as if to receive a gift. In English, it's still there, but barely there. Mostly it's there. You just need to accept it. It means tolerance, resignation, putting up with it. Yeah, but if you have your grandmother's ring and you're going to give it to your bride to be, and this is such a precious thing. Their grandmother was so important to you, but you have the ring. You're the last one. It was given to you, and you're going to give it to your bride to be. And you say, here, would you accept this? You don't mean, would you tolerate this gift?
Mm.
Could you put up with the ring from my grandmother? Are you resigned to accept an heirloom? No, you mean this is so precious. I'm asking you willingly to receive it as a gift. That act of receiving is what I'm asking you to do, knowing how precious this is. Yeah? I don't know what you say in French, but I bet you have things like that. Maybe even linked to what happens, but maybe not. But you have the words that are
A-
like that.
Accepter,
Ah,
accepter.
yeah. So here's the thing. Acceptance in acceptance and commitment therapy is to receive this gift that's offered of our feeling, remembering, sensing, experiencing, even thinking. Although be careful because so much of our thought is judgmental and categorical. And there we need something we're calling diffusion.
Mm.
We used to call it deliteralization, but it's really cognitive flexibility. It's that same stepping back so that you can step in, of noticing the products of your analytic mind, which is helpful sometimes and hurtful often,
Mm.
and isn't the entire contents of your mind. You have, wow, how pink. In addition to, you have a sunset mode of mind in your mind, in addition to how you behave when you're fixing your car or doing your taxes or solving a problem. But when you apply that to yourself, now you're a problem to be solved and you're doomed. You're not a problem to be solved.
Mm.
You're a thing to be fixed. So we need cognitive flexibility, emotional flexibility, acceptance. Now, recently, just the last 2 or 3 years, we're saying acceptance and non-clinging, because the attachment piece is also important because you can be a joy junkie and try to cling to
Mm.
joy, which is the absolute opposite of joy. Joy junkies are not happy. And if you want to see an example, look at real junkies. You know, you can get joy
Mm.
easily. Just inject the right chemicals. Woohoo! It'll ruin your life. And it's
Mm.
called a fix in English because it repairs you, it fixes you, and because just like a butterfly that you pin to a bulletin board, it's fixed in place. Oh, look how beautiful. No, you've killed the butterfly. What are you talking about? Yes, how beautiful. I see the wings, but that's just butterfly wings. That's not the butterfly anymore.
Mm.
That's a specimen. And we do that all the time. Oh, that sunset was so beautiful. This one's no good. Not like this one. So acceptance and non-clinging is emotional flexibility, being able to dive in, appreciate cognitively. Also, we need those skills. And those two together are what I mean by openness.
Mm.
And openness is not stepping back, even though the witnessing, noticing sense of self helps you do this. It's backing from the painting enough that you can appreciate it and step in.
Can we say that acceptance is feeling the feelings and to really feeling what's offered by experience? And my question is a little bit larger. It's uh, how can we authentically feel one's feelings?
Yeah, I think the early phrase in ACT was feeling fully and without needless defense. And I think we can demystify this part too. There's no, this is on a continuum. And if you 100% disappeared into that, you disappear, which is wonderful. It's great. If you're making love with your wife, disappear. It would be wonderful. Then come back. But let's make it simple. If you reached out to your desk or the table in front of you and you just felt it, if you slow down and focus on it, you'll notice things you didn't notice if you just quick felt it.
Mm.
You'll notice more. You can probably even really work on it to notice even more. There's people whose job it is to taste wine, to sip coffee, to look at paintings, to listen to music. That's their job. And what do they do with it? They appreciate. What else? They describe. Why would you do it? Because the deep divers help us when we're busy and we're running around know something from their poetry or their novel or their bottle of wine. Yeah. So, in the same way, you in your own life, nobody's keeping score. You'll never be finished, no matter how deep you go. There's more deep to go. But you can take time to appreciate and feel. So, being able to broaden the range of emotions, dive into the experience of particular emotions, have words for things that you may not have words for. Now, that one's amazing. That's a little tricky. But if you look at things like exposure to things that are difficult, and the modern view of exposure is completely thrown over, and we were part of that, we meaning the ACT community, we helped throw this over. It is not habituation. It's not, oh, when you're no longer anxious, then you can expose yourself to this scary situation. That's false. No, it's being able to be open enough to learn and do new things in the presence of things that squeeze you down, that closed you off. That's what exposure is. Okay. Turns out just to observe it enough and give it a name helps you do that. Doesn't even, and now it'll be good if there's common names in your culture because then you can talk to others. But that doesn't even that, even you could make up a name about emotions. Yeah, of course, it's easy. There's a phrase in English, having butterflies. It means
Mm.
a little feeling in your stomach. We don't treat it as an emotion, but we could. Are you butterflying now? How much butterflying are you doing before a talk, let's say? We'd probably end up with big pharma wanting to treat butterfly disorder. So it's probably not a good idea that way. So my point being emotional openness allows you then to bring the whole of you into broadening, narrowing, deepening in ways that allow your history, which is what emotions are, and the present moment, which is the ones that are evoking them now. So your history and your present moment to come into your consciousness in a way that you can be wise and hear. If you're running from your history, you will never be wise because the only source of wisdom you've got is your history. That's it. Could be what people told you that you don't have, fortunately, you don't have to experience every bad thing to be wise about it, but you need to listen and learn from your community. That's your history. And personally, your experiences, that's your history. And then there's the present circumstance. If you're not open, you're dumb.
Mm.
Want to be dumb? Want to be dumb about life? I can tell you as a 75-year-old, it ends. My brother died 2 years ago. My sister died 3 months ago. It ends. You want to end without having lived?
It's really I've got an image of a video that you made with the rope to
Oh,
hold
yeah.
the rope, and what you said about a- acceptance and uh, diving in the emotions, maybe one has to have a little bit of equilibrium or not to be fixated on these emotions and to have a life also and not to be obsessional maybe.
Well, this is one thing that is exciting about what we're doing with contemplative practice, if I can say, because in the sources of some of these practices, not all of them, but some of them, they came from people who were really dedicating their lives to a deep dive. But in order to be able to do that and eat, they had to go collect alms from others, sometimes others in the same religious tradition. And the people who are giving you money and alms never meditate, never, or just a little bit. And they don't, because they're out there living their lives, but they see that it's important for some people to do that and to then speak more wisely. And they'll take some of that wisdom. So here I would give you alms. At its worst, it'd be you do my work for me. That's not going to work. At its best, it's recognizing that uh, there's many pathways and journeys. And as you said earlier, this clearing in the forest is of importance. And you do want some people who are really, really maintaining silence for decades. What a crazy idea. There's people who maintain silence for decades. Are you going to do that and then go to work? You're going to be fired, dude. If you're earning things at your job and you're giving it to your family, I don't suggest that as a good idea. But do I say to the person who's doing that, no, that's a bad idea? No, no, it's a good idea. So coming back to my point, if we demystify this and kind of appreciate it, the spectacular and wonderful things that we've discovered, really, scientifically, is just a little bit, is massively helpful. There's teachers in the wisdom and contemplative traditions who hate those studies. Maybe that's too strong an emotional word. But, well, let me give you an example. Um, Herb Benson's demystification of transcendental meditation, that particular wing. You don't need a mantra and a special thing with fairy dust. Just say the word one. You don't need a whole lot of spooky stuff. Just say it over and over again. All right. You may not, he called it the relaxation response, which was probably a mistake. John Kabat-Zinn called it stress management for the same reason. If he gave it spooky names, nobody wanted to do it. In fact, John actually tried some earlier names that were closer to what he was doing, and none of the physicians in his hospital would even come to his workshops. It was until he called it stress management, then they would. Well, Herb showed 8 weeks of meditation, and I think it's only was something like 10 minutes a day. Something like 12% of your genome changes. Every cell in your body is more than 10% different. Not because the DNA changed, but because the methylation of cytosine made it unreadable. Methylation, epigenetics, made 12%, I think it's 12% of your genome change. And to the extent that we understand what these gene systems do, we don't really have genes for things. They're systems. The genes for things that you learned in high school biology, please. That's not the way to think about it. It's a complex system. But to the extent that we understand them, they were involved with the stress response, orienting for danger, default mode network in your brain, stuff like that. Come into the present moment, way that's more open. You don't have to constantly be looking and your genes sort of settle down. Wonderful. Oh, now then he did a study. I believe I may have the times wrong. I think it was half an hour of meditation. 3% of the genome change. So, friends, if you really want to say practice, 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 if you're a contemplative person, okay. But do understand the persons on the factory floor ain't going to do it, very likely. And furthermore, if you look at the randomized trials, more than half of the folks stop doing it regularly. But they get considerable, noticeable, measurable, important differences happening in their life, all the way down to their neurobiology. So, should we always say to the culture, practice, practice, practice? I would say it this way, all hands on deck. Let's learn ways to create modern minds for this crazy modern world we're in, where anything awful happens over the next 5 minutes. This isn't awful, that's my wife, but everything awful, you can see it. People are putting Go cameras and shooting children and live streaming it.
Mm.
That's the modern world we're living in. You want to go to get a Patreon account, you can see the bombs falling right now in the Ukraine, and you can see the body parts flying out of the tanks. Hundreds of hours. You can do a deep dive. I'm not, look, what I'm saying is, for that kind of a world, we better have everybody being lifted up. We need baby Buddhas coming out of our elementary schools. And we can't do it with one size fits all. That was the way the mystics did it, so that's the way we do it.
Mm.
And that little example I gave you, hey, come over here, look back at that. I don't know. People sometimes tell me that I'm not part of the mindfulness tradition and stuff like that, but it kind of seems to me like we need to really think about all the different ways we can put the aids to being whole and free as a human being, to be conscious into the world for everybody. And any ideas you got, let's test them, let's try them, and appreciate the worldwide community that's trying to do that.
You talk about the mindfulness community, and in ACT there's uh, an axe that is different. It's the value part and the commitment, the action part. It's
Yes.
really different. It reminds me of Stoicism, maybe. There's a uh, yes, you just have to determine what are your values.
Yeah.
Can you just explain what was the idea behind that aspect?
Yeah, and I've been doing a deep dive on this because I'm doing some talks about the history of this and writing some papers. And I have my last lecture just 3 weeks from now at the University of Nevada. And all of my students, almost half of the 56 PhDs I've graduated, are coming back. And it's
Mm.
going to be a wonderful event. And I really wanted to dive into what happened. And I tell a little bit of the story in the TEDx talk about my horrifying hitting bottom. Uh, and and in that talk, I explained that some of the values work opened up, even though from the very beginning it was there, but then like a seed that was planted, it grew and took a couple of years for me to appreciate it more. Um, what my personal experience added was this importance of well, you'll see in that TED talk if you look, an out of body experience that's a spiritual experience. And it's around this witnessing, noticing sense of self. And then in there, not just cognitive flexibility, which I've been working on for years, but emotional flexibility. and attentional flexibility. But just a little bit inside there was also purpose, was yearning to be about something or to, and I think they're built into those processes. I think this sense of self includes a yearning to belong. When you connect in consciousness with others, why are you lifted up? If you look with kind eyes at a neonate in the first hours of birth, after birth, the baby dumps natural opiates. If you
Mm.
look at them with kind eyes, we're the social primates. We're meant to belong. Acceptance. We're meant to feel. Diffusion. As we become verbal, we're meant to understand and make sense of. Attention. It matters to know where we are or to be oriented in the present moment. Values. Even very young children are working to try to become competent in a way that's meaningful. And they'll say it out loud once they get a little bit of language. Not that way, Mama. I want to do it. I want to do it. Little ones, yeah. So there's a yearning to for meaning. Uh, Now, when it first shows up, it's about goals. I mean, a neonate.
Mm.
Well, there's some spectacular stuff with brand new babies. If you put one of those things above the crib, that has things dangling down and so forth, and you put it on a motor, and if a brand new baby moves its hands, it begins to spin. Within hours, the baby's doing this. Why? Why? Because we love seeing how what we do impacts the world. And we yearn to see things, like brand new babies will work if you put them in a room where you can control the light to have enough light that they can see while they're awake. Why? Because they're curious. They want to see. Now, here's my point. Values, yes, can be stated. And you can say, what are my values? And you can make a list and you can put them into words. The wonderful thing we did in ACT was we never listed those words. We never said, here are the list of values, which the positive psychology people did, I think, to their detriment, because then you go to Native Americans in Canada
Mm.
and they have a theory of values that have 7 different levels and things that I don't even understand. I'm trying to talk to some of the wisdom teachers there, the knowledge keepers, they call themselves. And I'm blown away by it. It's highly elaborated and it's interesting. And it's not what you would know being raised in San Diego with a couple of white parents.
Mm.
So here's the thing I want to say about values. There's a felt quality. There's a so-ness to life when it's unfolding in a way that fits who and how you really are, this more spiritual sense of self. And it's up to you to see it and choose it. When you do, you'll probably say things that sound so familiar, like, love makes the world go round, and I want to be a loving person. It sounds like a hackneyed phrase that yeah, the reason it's hackneyed in it is that we're we're so similar as these social primates that
Mhm.
we end up with things like at the bottom of my email, love isn't everything, it's the only thing,
Mm.
and every email I send is there. So back to the issue of values, it was important because I immediately saw that I had been playing a game of trying to earn my right to be here and that it was crushing me. And I wanted to play a game that was more like I'm going to do something about human suffering because I'd seen it in my home. I'd seen my parents suffer so much and not know what to do. And a little boy under the bed who was terrified said, I'm going to do something when he heard his parents fighting in the other room. So I spent my life trying to do something. Yeah. And the single most common marker of values is tears.
Mm.
With goal setting, it never happens. I want to like make a lot of money. You never cry. I want a big house. Nobody cries. I want to do something. I can feel the tears just this far away. Yeah. So, to friends, if you're listening and wondering, what are we talking about in ACT about values? We're talking about the pain you experience when you flip it over of the thing that you wanted that was taken away by that betrayal, by that lie that you told, by that horrifying event. We're talking about appreciating like a sunset what was inside that moment when you felt especially alive, especially connected, especially here. We're talking about the heroes you look up to. You say, wow, why? Because they're reflecting something that you want to have in your behavior. The, this, if you look at the heroes and who are wise, I don't mean the heroes like, oh, I wish I was so famous as that person, Elon Musk. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ones where you look up and you go like, you're a guide for me. Yeah. Slow it down. Appreciate that person. Those are your values.
Mm.
How do you know? Because you were attracted to it, like a moth to a flame. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Mm.
what I think that's the point. That's where the rubber meets the road. If you get that far, then build habits around it, extend it to your relationships in your body, and you're done. If you not done, finished, but you're on the road. If you're just working on mindfulness, period, end of story, be careful because that can be turned selfish.
Mm.
You take care of the kids. I gotta go meditate. What? If you did that
Mm.
in a mindfulness retreat with a monk, he'd make you do the dishes. What are you talking about? But in the Western world, we put it in the hands of therapists, and now we've actually have measures of this. 1 out of 10 people, about 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20. If you look at it longitudinally, it disappears in our stats unless you look longitudinally, individually. They take these methods and they turn them selfish. We're not helping the world by giving people yet more routes to be selfish. I'm not judging people and saying that. Please, if you're looking to somebody who really knows how to be selfish, and I'm working on it, you know.
That's a really good advice. Not to be focused only on the meditation and on the cushion and forgetting the world. And it's really beautiful. And we are coming to the end of this interview, and it was very rich. And I sincerely thank you for your answers and your authenticity. It's really palpable. It's I can feel that it's more than studies and publications. Uh, Really, thank you for that. And I will post the video in a few weeks because I have to do the translation and the subtitles, and I'm slow. So, but I will send you the link if you want to share it.
Absolutely. And I know you're still recording. If I could say one thing that could be hacked on, I mean, it's just a selfish thing, but not really selfish, but I'll do it anyway. If you want to follow my work, just go to stephenchayes.com, say, yes, please send it to me, and I'll send you a monthly newsletter. I never spam people. One click, you're out if you don't like it. But the other thing is, if you want to follow this work and you don't want to follow it through me, just Google psychological flexibility or acceptance and commitment therapy or training, and you'll find things that are free, such as the World Health Organization has a book that's an act book with audio tapes. It's the most downloaded document in the entire WHO website called Doing What Matters in Times of Stress because it's been tested and shown to be helpful with people who are dealing with the tragedies of war or COVID or so. Don't let this be about building a castle in the sky. That's not what I'm trying to do. If you see something in here and you want to call it something different or put it in combination with other things, please do that. If it's about not just having a name and being able to say it's mine, but instead about putting these processes into people's lives that uplift them. You don't have to ask permission. Please do it. And thanks
I
for the
will
opportunity.
put the links for your website and all the informations in the description and the books. I loved your last book because it's an very complete. It's uh, very rich and it's I'm quite a geek, so it's
Good.
was perfect for me.
Well, and, a liberated mind, or probably not doing anything that's in the recording. In a liberated mind, if you go back, like everything is documented, but I did it with a style that doesn't even have little numbers saying there's a reference
Mm.
so that it wouldn't interfere with normal readers. But for geeks, you go to the back of the book and start doing a deep dive. Oh my goodness, that's pretty fun. This is 40 years later, and we've certainly geeked out um, on, and that is what our pathway brings to the open clearing. So thanks for the opportunity to put a little bit of that into your community.
Thank
Maybe it'll
you,
help.
and have a wonderful day.
You too, my friend.
Bye.
Yeah, be well.